The journal was already in my hands when I noticed the problem. I'd been reshelving returns at the Leland County Public Library for 6 hours, a slow Tuesday in mid-March. The kind of day when most of what comes back is large print mystery novels and children's audiobooks. The hiking journal came in with a batch of donations dropped at the front desk in a grocery bag, no name attached. We get those fairly often. People clean out garages, storage units, dead relatives' houses, and anything with a binding ends up in a paper sack on our counter. Most of it goes to the quarterly sale. Some of it we keep. My job, among other things, is sorting that pile. It was a standard composition notebook, black and white marbled cover, college-ruled 70 sheets. Someone had written PCT Section H, 2009 on the front, in permanent marker that had faded to a dark brown. PCT meant Pacific Crest Trail. Section H covers the stretch through the southern Cascades in Oregon, roughly Crater Lake to the Mount Jefferson Wilderness. I know this because I've hiked portions of that section myself. It's one of the reasons I moved to Leland County after graduate school. Library science degree, proximity to good trail access, affordable rent. A simple arrangement. I opened the journal because we always check donations for personal items, photographs, pressed flowers, loose checks. People leave things between pages. The first entry was dated June 14th, 2009, and described a resupply stop in the town of Shelter Cove. Ordinary hiker's prose, mileage, weather, the condition of the rider's feet. No name on the inside cover, but the handwriting was careful and consistent, small, slightly left-leaning print. Blue ballpoint. A person comfortable with writing things down. I flipped to the last used page. The entry was dated March 19th, 2025. I checked the date on the staff computer behind the circulation desk. It was March 18th, 2025. I read the entry again. It was short 4 lines. Leland County Library. Third shelf, east wall, between the Applegate and Rogue River topos. If you're reading this, the journal is back. I need you to check the entry for August 7th. Then I need you to not do what I did. I looked at the east wall. The third shelf held our regional topographic map collection. The journal had not come from that shelf. It had come from the donation bag on the front counter. But the entry described the exact shelf where, if I had cataloged the journal as a local hiking document, I probably would have placed it. I turned to August 7th. The August 7th, 2009. Entry was longer than the others. The handwriting was the same careful blue print, but the spacing between lines was wider, as though the writer had slowed down. It described a section of trail north of Separation Creek, in the Mount Washington Wilderness. The writer had been hiking alone, around mile marker 2012. A rough estimate, they noted the trail crossed a shallow saddle between 2 unnamed ridges. The forest was old-growth Douglas fir. Dense canopy, not much undergrowth. The writer recorded that at approximately 2:40 in the afternoon, they stepped off trail to filter water from a small spring marked on their map. The spring was there. The water was clear. But while kneeling beside it, the writer noticed that the ambient sound had changed. Not disappeared, changed. The birds were still present, but they were producing calls the writer didn't recognize. Not unusual species, unusual sequences, as if familiar bird calls had been rearranged into a different order. The writer used that specific language, rearranged into a different order. They filtered the water. They returned to the trail. They noted that the trail itself appeared correct, same width, same wear pattern, same blaze marks on the trees. But the light was wrong. The sun was in roughly the right position for 2:40 p.m. in early August, but the shadows on the ground did not correspond. The writer described the shadows as about 2 hours ahead of the sun. They checked their watch. It read 2:47 p.m. They took a compass bearing. The bearing was consistent with their map. Everything was correct except the shadows. The writer continued north. Within half a mile, the shadows had returned to normal. The bird calls normalized. The entry ended with a single additional sentence. I looked back once. The saddle was still visible. The light in it was different from the light where I was standing. I closed the journal. I want to be precise about what I did next, because later it mattered that I could account for the sequence. I set the journal on the processing cart behind the circulation desk. I helped 2 patrons, one with a hold pickup, one with a printer jam. I shelved a row of returned DVDs. Then I came back to the cart and opened the journal to the last entry again. March 19th, 2025. Tomorrow. The handwriting was the same as every other entry. Same blue ballpoint, same left-leaning print, same careful letter formation. I compared it against the June 14th, 2009 entry and the August 7th, 2009 entry. If the final entry was written by a different person, that person had practiced extensively. If it was written by the same person, then the same person who hiked Section H of the PCT in the summer of 2009 had written a note referencing this specific library, this specific shelf, and tomorrow's date. I photographed every page of the journal with my phone. I don't know exactly why I did that. Professional habit? Maybe we document condition issues for donated items. Or maybe I had already decided that the journal might not stay where I put it. I placed it on the 3rd shelf of the east wall, between the Applegate and Rogue River topos, exactly where the final entry said it would be. Then I went home. I should explain the library, because the building matters. The Leland County Public Library is in a converted Grange Hall on the east side of Prospect, Oregon. Population around 500. The library serves the surrounding county, but daily traffic is light 15 to 30 patrons on a good day, fewer in winter. The building dates to 1938. It was converted in 1971. The original Grange Hall had a single large meeting room, which is now the main reading area. A small addition in the back holds the staff office, a restroom, and the processing area where we receive and sort materials. The east wall is exterior, brick, with no windows. The map collection lives there because the shelving was custom built in the 90s to hold oversized folded maps, and nobody ever rearranged it. I've worked at the library for 4 years. Before that, I worked at the Josephine County System in Grants Pass. I have a master's in library science from the University of Washington. I say this not because it's interesting, but because what happened next required me to do the kind of work librarians are actually trained to do. And I want it to be clear that I followed a method. The next morning, March 19th, the date written in the journal, I arrived at the library at 8:15, 45 minutes before opening. The journal was on the shelf where I'd left it. I checked the final entry, still dated March 19th, 2025. Same 4 lines, same blue ink. I examined the page under the desk magnifier we use for appraising old books. The ink on the March 19th entry had the same degree of absorption into the paper as the entries from 2009. It didn't look freshly written. It didn't look 16 years old, either. It looked like it had always been there. I started with the PCT records. The Pacific Crest Trail Association maintains a permit database. In 2009, through hikers were required to carry permits, and most registered with a trail name or real name. Section hikers sometimes registered, sometimes didn't. I couldn't search the database directly. It's not public, but the PCTA maintains completion lists and trail journals online, and I spent the morning cross-referencing what I could. I was looking for anyone who hiked Section H in late July or early August 2009, and who might have kept a journal matching the one on my shelf. I found trail registers from the Shelter Cove resupply scanned pages posted by other hikers. Some were barely legible. Most were the usual stuff: trail names, mileage, jokes, complaints about mosquitoes. On a scan dated June 15, 2009, one entry read, "Heading north from Shelter Cove. Beautiful day. Feet erect. EM." The initials meant nothing to me, but the date was one day after the journal's first entry. The handwriting in the scanned register was small, left-leaning, blue ballpoint. I printed the scan. I held it next to my phone's photo of the journal's June 14th entry. The letter forms were consistent, not proof, consistent. I searched for EM in the online PCT completion records for 2009. Nothing. That wasn't unusual. Many people don't complete the full trail, and section hikers often don't report. I tried variations. EM Hiker PCT 2009. EM Pacific Crest Trail, Oregon. Nothing useful. I tried a different approach. I pulled up USGS topographic maps for the Mount Washington Wilderness and located the section of trail the journal described: the shallow saddle north of Separation Creek, near mile 2012. The spring was marked on the map. It was real. A small seasonal water source, unnamed, shown with the standard blue dash line symbol. I checked it against more recent maps. The spring appeared on the 1988 quad and the 2011 revision. On a 2018 update, it was gone. Not marked as dry, just absent, as if it had never been indicated. I made a note of that. Then I went to lunch. When I came back, the journal had been moved. It was still on the east wall, still on the third shelf, but it was now between two different maps, the Diamond Lake and Cowhorn Mountain quadrangles, about 18 inches north of where I'd placed it. No one had been in the library over lunch. I closed and locked the building. The front door was still locked when I returned. The back door's deadbolt was engaged. The windows don't open. They were sealed during the 1971 renovation and haven't been touched since. I checked whether I might have misremembered the position. I hadn't. I had deliberately placed the journal between the Applegate and Rogue River topos, because those were the maps named in the final entry. The Diamond Lake and Cowhorn Mountain quads cover an area farther north, closer to the actual section of trail described in the August 7th entry. The journal had been moved toward its own subject matter. I put it back. I photographed its position. I placed a small pencil mark on the shelf edge to confirm exact placement. I finished my afternoon shift. The journal did not move again that day. That evening, I did something I debated for a long time afterward. I emailed the Deschutes National Forest Ranger Station in Bend and asked whether there were any records of unusual incidents on the PCT in the Mount Washington Wilderness during the summer of 2009. I identified myself as a librarian researching a donated trail journal. The email was professionally written. I cited the approximate mile marker and the date. The reply came 2 days later from an administrative assistant named Karen Olerud. It was brief and polite. She said the district office had no record of any incidents on that section of trail in the summer of 2009. She added, without my asking, that the section north of Separation Creek had been temporarily closed from 2011 to 2014 for trail realignment, and that the closure had been extended once. She included a PDF of the closure notice, which I opened expecting to see the standard language about erosion, blowdowns, or wildfire damage. The closure reason listed was environmental survey ongoing. I have seen a lot of federal trail closure notices. I have never seen one that listed environmental survey ongoing, as the reason for a multi-year closure of a maintained PCT section. Closures happen for fire, flood, hazard trees, endangered species habitat, or construction. Environmental surveys are conducted on open trails. You don't close 3 miles of a national scenic trail for 4 years to survey the environment. You survey the environment and then close the trail if the survey finds something, unless the survey found something first. I printed the PDF. I added it to the folder I had started, which by then contained my photographs of the journal, the scanned trail register page, the topo map comparison showing the missing spring, and a timeline I had begun constructing. I was not yet concerned. I was interested. There is a difference, and I remained on the correct side of it for approximately 1 more week. The next development came not from the Forest Service, but from the journal itself. On March 24th, 5 days after the date of the final entry, I arrived at the library and found the journal in its correct position on the shelf. I opened it to confirm nothing had changed. The final entry was still dated March 19th. But there was now handwriting on the inside back cover that had not been there before. It was in pencil soft graphite, slightly smudged, as if written quickly. The same left-leaning print. It said, "You looked up the closure. Don't look up the survey." I held the journal under the magnifier. The graphite was fresh. I could see the faint sheen of recently deposited carbon on the paper fibers. Someone had written this recently within days, possibly hours. I went through my photographs from the week before. I had photographed every page, including the inside covers. On March 18th, the inside back cover had been blank. I was certain. The photo confirmed it. I put the journal back on the shelf. I sat at my desk and thought about what I was willing to do and what I was not willing to do. Then I looked up the survey. The Deschutes National Forest Environmental Survey records for the Mount Washington Wilderness are partially available through the Forest Service's online planning database. Most surveys generate a report that is filed, summarized, and cross-referenced with the closure that prompted them or that they prompted. I searched for environmental surveys conducted between 2010 and 2015 in the Separation Creek drainage. I found 3. The first was a standard botanical survey from 2010, conducted along the PCT corridor prior to a planned reroute. Normal scope, normal findings. Native plant inventory, invasive species assessment, soil composition. The second was a wildlife survey from 2012, also standard. Spotted owl habitat assessment. Filed, completed, unremarkable. The third was from 2013. It was listed in the database index, but when I clicked the link, the page returned a generic document not available error. Not access restricted, not file not found. The database acknowledged the survey existed. It had a file number. It had a date. It had a project lead listed a name. Dr. Hannah Voss, affiliated with Oregon State University. But the document itself was not there. I searched for Hannah Voss. She was real, an ecologist, formerly with the OSU Department of Forest Ecosystems and Society. Her faculty page still existed but was marked emeritus. She had retired in 2019. Her published work included papers on old-growth canopy structure, mycorrhizal networks, and one paper, co-authored in 2008. Shadow phenology, the study of the timing and behavior of shadows as an ecological variable. How shadow patterns created by canopy structure affect understory growth, soil temperature, moisture retention, and organism behavior. The journal's August 7th entry described shadows that were 2 hours ahead of the sun, I printed Hannah Voss's faculty page and her publication list. I found the 2008 Shadow Phenology paper in the OSU Library's digital repository and read it. It was dry, technical, and unexceptional. A methodology paper proposing that long-term shadow pattern data could be used to detect canopy changes more sensitively than satellite imagery. The paper mentioned in its introduction that certain old-growth stands in the Oregon Cascades exhibit shadow behavior that is difficult to reconcile with measured solar angles, likely due to complex canopy refraction effects that remain poorly characterized. The phrase I focused on was difficult to reconcile with measured solar angles. I wrote to Hannah Voss. I found a personal email address through the OSU alumni directory. I identified myself. I described the journal in general terms, an anonymous PCT Hikers account from 2009, donated to our library, describing unusual shadow observations in the Mount Washington wilderness. I asked whether her 2013 survey in the Separation Creek area had addressed similar observations. She replied in 11 minutes. The entire reply was, "Where did you get that journal?" I wrote back. I explained the donation bag, the grocery sack, the lack of a name. I described the journal's contents in more detail. I mentioned the composition notebook, the date range, the initials EM. I did not mention the final entry dated March 19, 2025. I did not mention the message on the inside back cover. Her second reply came 4 hours later. It was longer. She said the 2013 survey had been conducted at the request of the Forest Service District Ranger, following persistent anecdotal reports from trail maintenance crews. She said the survey had been inconclusive in a way that made the district uncomfortable. She said the report had been filed but was later removed from public access at the district's request, not classified, just removed. She said she had a copy and had no intention of sharing it by email. She said if I wanted to understand what the journal was describing, I should come to Corvallis and read the report in person. She said one more thing. She said, "The initials EM, do you know who that was?" I said I didn't. She said, "Neither do I. But those initials appear in my field notes from the 2013 survey, carved into a tree at the spring site. They were already old when I found them." I arranged to visit Corvallis the following Saturday. The library is closed Saturdays in winter. I made the drive in just under 4 hours. Hannah Voss lived in a small house near the OSU campus. She was in her early 70s, thin, precise in her movements. She had the survey report printed and waiting on her dining room table. She offered me coffee. We sat. The report was 41 pages. I will not reproduce it entirely. I will describe what mattered. The 2013 survey had been designed to characterize an anomaly that trail maintenance crews had reported intermittently since at least 2005. The anomaly was simple. In a specific section of old-growth forest along the PCT, roughly half a mile in length, the shadows cast by the canopy did not correspond to the position of the sun. The discrepancy was not constant. It appeared to vary by time of day, season, and Voss believed by the presence of an observer. Her methodology had included time-lapse photography, solar angle measurements, and canopy light modeling. The results showed that during certain periods always in the afternoon, always between 1:30 and 4 p.m., the shadows in the survey area preceded the sun's position by between 90 minutes and 3 hours. The effect was consistent across multiple cameras and measurement stations. It could not be explained by canopy refraction, atmospheric distortion, or equipment error. The shadows behaved as if the sun were farther west than it actually was. As if, within that half mile of forest, time had moved ahead. Voss had included a section titled Observer Effect, which described something she clearly had difficulty writing. On 3 separate days during the survey, the shadow discrepancy had increased measurably when more than 2 people were present in the survey area. On one occasion, with a 4-person field team, the shadows had advanced by nearly 4 hours, placing them in a position consistent with early evening, while the sun was still in its early afternoon arc. One team member had reported hearing bird calls she described as out of order. Another had noted that the trail appeared to have been recently maintained, despite the closure. I looked up from the report. Hannah was watching me. "The trail appeared recently maintained," I said. "During a closure," she said. "No crews had been in there for 2 years." "What did the Forest Service do with this?" "They pulled the report, extended the closure another year. Then they reopened the trail in 2014 and never mentioned the survey again." She paused. "The shadow anomaly stopped during the last week of the survey. The data went normal, perfectly normal, as if it had never happened." "Did it come back?" "I don't know. I wasn't invited to look again." She let me read the rest of the report. The final section was a set of appendices raw data tables, photographs, and field notes. The field notes were handwritten, in Voss's own careful script. On the page dated September 3rd, 2013, she had recorded the following: "Found carved initials on Douglas fir approximately 40 meters east of the spring. EM in a rectangular border. Carving is weathered estimated 15 to 30 years old based on bark regrowth. No other carvings observed in survey area. Initials do not correspond to any known trail crew member or PCTA volunteer." Below that, in smaller writing, added later in different ink, note: "Spring no longer appears on current USGS quad. Confirmed present in field. Water clear, cold, flowing. Approximately 2 liters per minute. Asked district hydrologist about omission from map. He said the spring Ichts nicht auf der neuen Karte does not appear on the new map. When I asked why, he said he didn't know. He said it in a way that meant he wasn't going to find out." I photographed the page with Voss's permission. Then I asked her the question I'd been holding since I arrived. "The journal's last entry," I said. "It's dated March 19th, 2025. She didn't react the way I expected. She didn't look shocked or confused. She set down her coffee cup with a kind of deliberate precision and said, "What does it say?" I told her. The shelf location. The instruction to check August 7th. The warning not to do what the writer did. And the note on the inside back cover? I hadn't told her about that. I looked at her. "There's always a note on the inside back cover," she said. I sat with that sentence for a long time. "Always," I said. "I've seen that journal before," she said. "Not the same physical journal, but the same journal. A black and white composition book. PCT Section H, 2009, written on the cover. The same entries. The same August 7th account." She was speaking slowly and clearly, the way someone speaks when they need the other person to understand that they are not confused. It showed up in the Bend Public Library in 2016. A donation, no name attached. The last entry in that copy was dated 2 days after the librarian found it. Different librarian, different shelf instruction, same warning. What happened? The librarian read the August 7th entry. She contacted the Forest Service. She was told there were no incidents on that section of trail in 2009. She put the journal on a shelf. A week later, it was gone. Not checked out, not in the returns, Gone. How do you know this? Because she contacted me. She'd found my name the same way you did through the survey records. She drove to Corvallis. She sat in that chair. Voss pointed to the chair I was sitting in. She told me the same things you're telling me now. And I told her what I'm about to tell you. She leaned forward. The August 7th entry is real. Someone hiked that section of trail in 2009 and experienced what they described. The shadow anomaly, the bird calls. The spring, all consistent with what my survey measured 4 years later. The journal is a real document, but it is also, in some way I can't explain, a recurring one. It appears in libraries, always in the southern Oregon region, always as an anonymous donation, always with a final entry dated one day in the future, always with an instruction that leads the finder to the August 7th entry, and always with a warning not to go to the trail. How many times? That I know of, 3, including yours. The Bend Library in 2016, the Jackson County Library in Medford in 2021, and now Leland County in 2025. What happened to the Medford one? The same thing. A librarian found it, read the August 7th entry, contacted the Forest Service, got nowhere, contacted me, and then the journal disappeared. Did either of them go to the trail? Voss didn't answer immediately. She stood, crossed to a filing cabinet in her living room, and returned with a manila folder. Inside were 2 printed email chains and a photocopy of a handwritten letter. The Bend librarian didn't go. She was spooked by the back cover message and didn't pursue it further. The journal vanished from her library about 10 days after she found it. And the Medford librarian? Her name was Ellen Marsh. The room went very quiet. E.M., I said. Voss nodded. Ellen Marsh found the journal in October 2021. She was more thorough than anyone. She found the survey, found me, read the report. And she decided the warning was wrong. She thought the journal was pointing her toward the trail, not away from it. She drove to the trailhead north of Separation Creek in November 2021. She hiked in alone. What happened? She came back. She was fine. She hiked the section, found the saddle, found the spring. She said the shadows were normal. No anomaly. No unusual sounds. She said it was just a forest. She wrote me a long email about it, somewhat embarrassed. She said she'd gotten caught up in the mystique of the journal and the survey and the whole pattern, and it had turned out to be nothing. She went home. She went back to work. Voss opened the manila folder to the handwritten letter. She mailed me this 6 weeks later, January 2022. The letter was on plain white paper, written in small, left-leaning blue print. I recognized the handwriting instantly. It was the handwriting from the journal. The letter read, Dr. Voss, I need to tell you what's been happening since my hike. The shadows in my house are wrong. Not dramatically, not in a way anyone else would notice. But I measure them. I've been measuring them since November. My kitchen window faces south. The shadow of the window frame crosses the floor at a predictable rate, which I've timed with a stopwatch to verify against solar tables. Starting in early December, the shadow has been arriving approximately 40 minutes early. The discrepancy is increasing. Last week, it was 53 minutes. The bird sounds outside my house have changed. Not the species, the pattern. I hear the same Steller's jays I've always heard, but they're singing in arrangements I don't recognize. I went back and listened to recordings I made years ago. The old recordings sound normal. The live birds do not. I don't know what happened on the trail. But something came home with me. Not a creature, not a presence, a timing. I am slightly ahead of everything around me, and the gap is widening. I am writing this letter by hand because I don't trust the timestamps on my computer anymore. Please don't come to my house. Please don't send anyone. I just need someone to know. I put the letter down. Did you go to her house? No, she asked me not to. I called her. We spoke on the phone for an hour. She sounded rational, calm, frightened, but clear. She said she'd seen a doctor, no health issues. She said she'd had her house checked for gas leaks, electromagnetic interference, anything that might cause perceptual distortion. Everything was normal. She said the only abnormality was the shadows and the birds. When did you last hear from her? February 2022. A short email. She said the shadow discrepancy in her kitchen had reached 2 hours and 14 minutes. She said she'd started hearing a sound at night. Not mechanical, not animal. She described it as like a forest, but with the wrong spacing between the trees. I don't know what that means. I wrote back. She didn't reply. Is she? She's alive. I checked. She still lives in Medford. She still works at the library. I drove down in the spring of 2022 and went to the library. She was at the front desk. She looked normal. I said her name, and she looked at me, and she was perfectly polite, and she had no idea who I was. I need to describe the drive home, because I made a decision on that drive that shaped everything afterward. I was on E5 south of Eugene, and the sun was going down behind the Coast Range, and I was watching the shadows of the overpass structures stretch across the highway ahead of me. They were normal. They were keeping pace with the sun. I checked this repeatedly over 30 miles, using my phone's compass and the clock on the dashboard. And the shadows were exactly where they should have been. And I was aware that checking the shadows on a highway was not something I had ever done before. And I was aware that I was doing it now. And I decided that I was going to leave the journal where it was and not go to the trail. I arrived back in Prospect at 9 p.m. I went to the library to check on the building. I do this sometimes, after being away, just confirming the doors are locked. I let myself in with my key. I turned on the processing area light. The journal was gone from the shelf. I checked the entire east wall. I checked the processing cart. I checked the returns bin, the donation pile, the staff office, the restroom. The journal was not in the building. The doors had been locked. The windows were sealed. No one else has a key except the county library director, who lives in Klamath Falls and had no reason to visit. I went home. I opened my phone and looked at the photographs I'd taken of every page. The photographs were gone. Not deleted. I checked the recently deleted folder, the cloud backup, every synced device. The image files were simply absent. My photo library jumped from March 17th to March 25th, with no images in between. As if I had not taken a photograph for an entire week. I sat at my kitchen table and tried to reconstruct what I could remember from the journal. The June 14th entry. Shelter Cove, resupply. Feet hurt. The August 7th entry. The saddle, the spring, the shadows, the birds. The final entry. The shelf, the instruction, the warning. The back cover message. Don't look up the survey. I had looked up the survey. I had visited Voss. I had read Ellen Marsh's letter. And now the journal was gone and my photographs were gone, and the only evidence I had was what I could carry in my own memory. Except that wasn't quite true. I still had the printed pages, the trail register scan, the closure notice PDF, the screenshots of Voss's publication list. Those were physical paper in a folder in my desk at the library. I went back and checked. The folder was there. Everything I had printed was still inside it. Whatever was happening to the journal and the digital photographs, it did not extend to secondary documents I had created independently. The printed evidence of my research remained. The primary source was gone. I did not contact Hannah Voss again. I did not look up Ellen Marsh. I did not file any kind of report. I went back to work on Monday and shelved returns and helped patrons and did my job. 3 weeks passed. On April 14th, 2025, I was processing a new batch of donations, a different grocery bag. Left on the counter sometime during the morning while I was in the back, children's books, a water-damaged paperback thriller, a VHS tape of a Ken Burns documentary, and a black and white composition notebook, college-ruled, 70 sheets. On the cover, in brown faded permanent marker, PCT Section H, 2009. I opened it to the last entry, April 15th, 2025. Tomorrow. The same 4 lines, the same instruction, the same shelf, the same warning. Except this time, below the warning, there was a 5th line I had not seen before. The shadows in your library are 51 minutes ahead. You won't notice until you measure. Please don't measure. I closed the journal. I placed it on the processing cart. I helped a patron with an interlibrary loan request. I printed a replacement library card for a teenager. I did my job. At 2:30 in the afternoon, the sun came through the single south-facing window in the staff office and cast the shadow of the window frame across the floor. I have seen this shadow every working day for 4 years. It crosses the edge of the filing cabinet at approximately 3:15 p.m. in mid-April. It was touching the filing cabinet when I looked. I did not take out a stopwatch. I did not check a solar table. I did not measure. The journal was sitting on the cart behind me, and the shadow was where it was. And I chose to believe the shadow was normal, and the sun was simply higher than I expected for mid-April. And this was not a difficult thing to believe if I did not verify it. The journal is on the shelf now. 3rd shelf, east wall, between the Applegate and Rogue River topos. I have not opened it again. I have not photographed it. I have not contacted anyone. I am writing this account by hand, on paper, at my kitchen table, because I do not trust digital files to remain where I put them, and because I need a record that exists outside the library. I don't know who EM was, the original EM, the one who hiked the trail in 2009, the one who carved their initials into a Douglas fir by a spring that stops appearing on maps. I don't know if they were Ellen Marsh, walking a trail years before she found a journal that sent her back to it, or someone else entirely, or both, or neither. I don't know how a composition notebook can be donated anonymously to multiple libraries across Southern Oregon, always containing the same entries, always with a final page dated 1 day ahead, always with a warning that precisely describes what the finder will do next. I don't know how my photographs disappeared. I don't know why the printed document survived. I don't know what Hannah Voss's survey actually measured in that half-mile of forest, or why the Forest Service pulled the report, or why the spring keeps disappearing from maps. I know that Ellen Marsh went to the trail and came back, and the shadows followed her home, and then she forgot everything. I know the journal is asking me to go. Every version of it, the shelf placement, the August 7th entry, the warning that describes the reader's own investigation as if it had already happened. All of it points toward the trail. The warning says don't go. But the warning is written by someone who already knows that I will look up the survey, that I will find Voss, that I will read the letter, that I will lose the photographs. The warning does not say stop researching. It says don't do what I did. And what the writer did, as far as I can tell, is hike to a spring in the Mount Washington wilderness and come home carrying a discrepancy that slowly widened until it consumed the person's ability to remember that it had happened. And I know one more thing, which is the thing that made me write this account tonight, instead of waiting. This evening, after work, I was washing dishes in my kitchen. The sun was low. The shadow of my window frame was on the floor. I was not measuring it. I was not looking at it. But I could see it in my peripheral vision. And as I stood at the sink, the shadow moved. Not in the slow way that shadows move with the sun. It jumped. A small distance, maybe 4 inches, in the wrong direction. Then it was still again. And it was in a position that I could not confirm was wrong, because I had never precisely measured where that shadow falls at 7:15 p.m. in mid-April. And I'm not going to measure it now. The journal told me not to measure. I think the journal is right. I think measuring is what makes it real. I think Ellen Marsh measured, and the act of quantifying the discrepancy is what anchored it to her. And the gap widened because she kept confirming it was there. And eventually it widened enough to take everything. And she is in a library in Medford right now, shelving books in a building whose shadows arrive an hour or 2 or 3 before they should, and she doesn't know, because she doesn't remember. And maybe that is what the forgetting is for. I am not going to the trail. I'm not going to measure the shadows. I'm going to go to work tomorrow and put the journal on the shelf and wait for it to disappear. And when it does, I am going to let it go to the next library and the next librarian. And I hope that person reads this account before they read the August 7th entry. And I hope they understand that the warning is not a dare. The journal will tell you to check the entry. Don't. The shadows in your building are already wrong. They were wrong before you opened the cover. You will not notice unless you measure. The journal knows this. The journal has always known this. It is not trying to help you. It is trying to be read by someone who will go to the trail and come back carrying the discrepancy home. Because that is how it moves, not through pages, but through people who measure what they should have left alone. I am putting this account in a stamped envelope and mailing it to Hannah Voss. If she remembers me, she'll keep it. If she doesn't, it will be a letter from a stranger about a forest she studied once. And she will probably throw it away. Either way, I will have created a document that exists outside the journal, outside the library, outside the digital record. A piece of paper in an envelope, carried by the Postal Service, immune to whatever removes photographs from phones and journals from shelves. Unless it isn't. In which case, you are not reading this. But the shadows on this page are still in the right place, falling at the right angle from the lamp on my kitchen table. And I'm choosing not to check whether that is true. That is the only choice I have left that I am certain is mine.